So we're joined all the way from across the Atlantic over there in the United Kingdom by the founder of Coding Black Females, tech entrepreneur, IT specialist, you name it, just a resume that I will put up against anybody. Charlene Hunter, thank you so much for joining us today. Well, I've got a room full here with me at Velma Jackson High School, and we've got recording this for all of our friends and all of our computer science engineering students in Madison County schools, including my good friend Angela Jordan over at Shirley Simmons Middle School and our YouTube channel. So we thank you so much for taking some time for us today to talk about your incredible career in tech.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to telling you a bit about my journey as well.
Absolutely. Now, and that's the thing. Your journey is so cool because you're from Birmingham. You went to the University of Birmingham, which is unbelievable university there in the United Kingdom. But you grew up as a child dealing with tech. So take us back to the beginning because your parents entrepreneurs, and you. I love the story about it was too cold to go outside, so you stayed and played the games and changed the coding on the games.
Yeah, definitely. So just to say, I grew up in Nottingham, which is very close to Birmingham, and then I went to Birmingham for university. But as you said, so my parents both run different types of tech companies. So my dad has a software company, and my mum has a training company. So when I was quite young, they actually, well, yeah, there's two sides of it, right? So at home, they'd actually bought me computers to just play games on. And I don't even think they knew that those computers did coding, but I clicked something and found code and then I started editing the code. And the same thing happened at school. So at the same time, as I said, I would not go outside to play because it was cold and I didn't really enjoy the cold. So I would stay in the computer instead and do some coding on that. So I'll be playing, there was this game that was called Snake or Nibbles. I don't even think people
Yeah,
play it anymore.
yeah.
But you collect the apples with this little line. And I used to play that all the time. But then I looked at the code one day and I was like, oh, let me start editing it. So I could change the colors, change the thickness of the snake and all sorts of things like that. And then I kind of started to have a little play at building my own kind of programs as well. So yeah, that was my first taste of coding, I guess. And then with my parents having companies, it meant that whether it's good or bad, they would make me work with them over the summer holidays. So during the summer, I would then learn how to build computers, how to write code, how to use different software applications as well.
Yeah, and you said even when you were a child, you were soldering motherboards, which I think is really cool as well. So I think that's cool. As you know, as young people are thinking about getting into this field, having software and hardware abilities makes you more marketable in the field.
It really does. And, I was just very lucky that I had parents that said, go on, have a go. So I was like, Dad, I can see you soldering these motherboards all the time. Let me have a go, please. So he was like, do you know what? Go on. We've got some new motherboards in. You build this one and you can do a bit of soldering. And I blew it up. And they could never use it. But he didn't punish me. He was just glad that I'd had a go. So I think what I tend to say to people is always like, if there's something that you want to try, ask somebody to have a go, try and have a go, have a play, because you then start learning new things. Like I know how to not blow up a motherboard now. So that's quite useful information to have.
Yeah, and then you went to like we said, the University of Birmingham, which is
Mm.
an unbelievable university there in the UK, one of the finest there is in the country. And your original goal was to get into economics. You were looking at math and finance. You said, tech,
Yeah.
it was fun, but I don't really see myself doing it, which is a very common tale. You kind of changed paths. So take us through your university journey because it's quite interesting on how you fell into this.
Yeah, so even on the run up to university, so I was doing for my A levels, so the exams that you do before you go to university, I'd chosen maths, further maths, and physics. So I was already very much down a very like mathematical and science route. But so that obviously doesn't relate to a job. So I'd gone to university and I started studying maths and I absolutely loved it. I really, really enjoyed doing maths. And as you say, I really thought that the next step that I would have would be accounting or something
Yeah.
financial because you think maths and numbers and the natural thing is finance. But luckily, I I had a lot of fun at university and I went out a lot and I did lots of fun things. Didn't study as hard as I should have done for my first couple of years. But then luckily that meant that I couldn't apply for jobs yet. So because I couldn't apply for jobs, I actually then tried loads of different things throughout the summer period again. So during the summer, I was building people's websites, I was doing bookkeeping, I was doing a range of different activities. And throughout that, I kind of realized that I really enjoyed building that website for somebody. So even though I'd made a bit of a mistake in how I had done my degree, I then knew that gave me time to figure out what path I wanted to go down. So from doing someone's website over that summer holidays, instead of me trying to figure out what job to try and get or if I could apply later, that sort of thing, I actually did a master's in computer science
Yeah.
instead. So that was fantastic. And every day that I was going to study for computer science, I just felt like I was cheating because it was like the most fun I'd ever had at uni. And I was like, I didn't know you could have this much fun when you learn. So yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, and you got your master's in computer science and you started working as an employee for a tech company. Now, I thought it was cool with our friend Jessie Augusta, you talked about on her podcast that, I had a good job, but I was seeing freelancers and contractors making way more than I was making, and they were doing the same job. So, talk about how that kind of led you to get into the freelance entrepreneurial side.
Yeah, so when I was, as you say, I started working and I was there as a consultant in this company. And the way consultancies work is they essentially find they find projects essentially for different companies to build. And then they charge you out on a daily basis to build those projects, right? So I was there and I was earning just a normal salary. And then I would, on the same team, there'd be contractors who were earning like over £500 a day to do the exact same amount of work, except they would start at 9 and leave at 5. But I was starting at 7 and leaving at like 7 or 8 o'clock in the night. So I was like, actually, what are they doing? I want to see what they're doing. And also, those companies were charging me out on a daily basis. So I kind of wanted to just see if I could go to one of those companies and be charge myself out on a daily basis as well. So the way I started freelancing and kind of started thinking in a kind of more entrepreneurial way was that I just went to some of the people that I used to work with. Do you have anything open? Let me see if I could work on one of your projects, and this is what my day rate is, and this is how we could work together. And that's how I started freelancing.
Wow.
And I think there's something so important about building up connections and not being afraid to ask somebody if they have an opportunity for you as well.
Yeah, and just a quick reference off the top of my head, you said 500 pounds a day. For our Americans here, that's about around 800 American dollars. So that's a quick conversion in my head, and that's a lot of money. So
It's a lot of money. Yeah.
yeah. Now and again, there's obviously pros and cons to being an employee and being a contractor, but when you seeing that you're working more hours for less money, that could really push you to the contractor side. So that's obvious. A big motivator. Now, you said yourself that when you first started doing this, it wasn't, you weren't out to diversify everything. It was when you were in these rooms and you noticed I'm the only one that looks like me here.
Mhm.
So talk about that because that's something that's very common here in the United States as well.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't want to change. It's not that I didn't want to change anything. I didn't think about it. So I was working and I've always loved software engineering. I've loved development, loved coding. And I think I just wanted to feel comfortable in my space, right? So I wanted to be able to talk about my hair and maybe how long it took to wash my hair at the weekend or something without having to explain what that means alongside, oh, and then I wrote some code. Like I just wanted
Oh
to have a
yeah.
normal conversation. So I set up Code in Black Females really just to do that so that I could meet other people. I actually had watched Hidden Figures the day before I set it up. So Hidden Legacy.
Unbelievable movie. One of the best movies I've ever seen.
I absolutely loved it. And it was the first time I'd watched a film where there were black women, there was coding, and there was maths. And my cousin turned to me and she was like, you could have been in that film. That could be your life. And I was like, oh yeah. So I felt like I was seen all of a sudden and I belonged in the space. So I set the group up to meet other people, just knowing that we would all feel the same way, basically. So that's what we did initially. Over time, we're now doing a lot of work to try and change the industry and have an impact. But really, it started out with wanting to build community around
Yeah.
being who I am, essentially.
Yeah, and it's grown internationally. I was able to find out about you here in the United States. You got presence in Canada, you got presence in the U.S. and Nigeria, all over Europe. So it really has taken off. It's something that I think is really cool that you guys do is you offer these boot camps to marginalized groups, to maybe people that don't have the access to it. Because like we've said, and like we said with other guests of this class, you know, the tech field, if you want to do the university route, that's fine. There's great computer science programs all over the world. but there are other paths to get into technical jobs. If you can learn to code in high school, or as y'all say, secondary school over in Europe, you learn to code when you're 18, 19 years old, you're able to get into these fields right now.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And when I started working, I thought you had to have gone to one of the best universities and done computer science to get into software engineering. It's only when I started coding Black females and I'd meet people who had done boot camps, or they just started learning at home on their own, or they found apprenticeship programs, and that was a completely other route in. And I think companies understand the benefits of people. Not that university is not a good route, because it still is a fantastic route, but they have
Absolutely.
the benefits to people that have gone through all the other pathways as well, because you can bring something else or another part of yourself to the room when you've gone through some of the other pathways too.
Yeah, and another point on that is, again, I represent our friend Jessie. She had a degree in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, if I had to do it over, I still would have gotten my degree. But while I was in school, I could have gotten a certification through a boot camp. And then I can tell a software company, look, I can sell with my psychology skills, but I
Mm-hmm.
also have these certifications where I can do your technical things and code things. And then, if people want to get into accounting, that's another field that's not going away. So if somebody doesn't want to get into tech, finance jobs are always going to be plentiful. But if you can code and have a finance degree, you're that much more marketable to any company in the world.
Absolutely. And I think it's just realizing that those coding skills are going to benefit you regardless. So obviously you can sign up to a program, but you can actually just learn a lot of technologies, a lot of languages online. Everyone is, I think at the moment, we really want everyone to learn Python because of AI, data, and machine learning, that sort of thing. But there's so many courses online that are available for free now that just weren't there. And maybe in the same vein as Jesse, I would say that I would have done the same thing. As much as I did some coding when I was growing up, I didn't do any of it in a structured way. I kind of just learned on the job and kind of got with it. But if I were to go back, I would probably I would definitely do some online coding or some online learning so that I'd be more ready when I actually get into the industry as well.
Yeah, and another thing too is that it's not just tech companies that need tech people. Literally, healthcare, restaurants, service industry,
Mhm.
really, the way that jobs are going. You mentioned AI. It's not the fact that AI is going to take jobs, but the types of jobs are going to be different. So having these AI skills now, especially in the healthcare field, I know even in the UK, the health informatics is a big, big deal. And right now in healthcare, IT and tech people are just as important as the doctors and nurses.
Mhm. There isn't really an industry that doesn't require people in tech. So if there's any interest that a person has, and we meet people all the time who they'll come from medicine and say that they actually want to move into tech now, that sort of thing. And they're doing it because they can see that they can have a bigger impact in healthcare by going through one of the coding boot camps, that sort of thing. So there isn't really an industry that doesn't need it, that doesn't need technology. So even if you don't want to be a coder, I would say, even if you're like, actually, coding isn't quite for me, but I know that I care about this industry in a particular way, I would still learn technology, because regardless of anything, we're going to get to a point that people need to know something about how to use tech or to code a little bit, even if it's like recognizing that a certain thing that you're working on needs to go to a dev team to then update it. So I would say that you can benefit regardless of the industry that you go into.
Yeah, and a shameless plug for our career center here in our school district. We have an engineering and robotics academy where students can get engineering and robotics certifications before they ever get out of high school. We have an IT academy where they can get the same certification. So the opportunities are there when you are still in school to get these certifications and start working immediately. Especially you mentioned how every field needs it. Manufacturing, these big car companies, these anything that's huge that's being built are using robots now. The robots are doing the work, but people have to program them. People have to run the code to program these machines. And I think that's something that gets lost is people are like, well, the jobs are going to leave. No, the skills are going to change. The jobs are still going to be there.
The jobs will absolutely be there. And even if you're not doing it because you want to work in robotics, what we've seen a lot of people do, that we've ended up working with, is be they might have a side hustle that they want to do where tech can actually help you to get there further quicker or something. We see a lot of people who have businesses where they might be, even if they're selling, like they might be selling different types of Caribbean food, but they want to make sure that more people can find out about that food, right? And
Yep.
building a website which can handle the purchasing of that food absolutely fine.
Absolutely.
Skills, it propels your business, and it means you can take things further forward, and you can use that to have a project that you have on the side whilst you're learning other things as well. So even if you don't choose to go into one of the big industries and you want to propel something that you're already working on, tech and coding can really help you do that too.
Yeah, and especially since COVID, small businesses are always looking for websites to be built. Small businesses are always looking for data to be managed, and especially with social media with the algorithm management, there's a lot of great side hustles that people can do from home. Now
Absolutely.
you did mention Python. You did mention Python. I know that's the hot language now, but what are and I saw your list of languages you have experience in, and it literally made my head spin. It was unbelievable. But what are some of the languages that you think young people could learn now to be more competitive in this changing job market?
I think at the moment, if you learn Python and or JavaScript, you'll be fine. So Python people are using, basically what you need to do is learn a language and learn it relatively well. Because if you learn Python or JavaScript, that's going to be relevant for the work that we do now. But also if you know these languages or one of them and you know it pretty well, when you need to learn a new language, it becomes quite easy. So the reason that you can see quite a large list of languages on mine is because I only learned one language. I've only ever learned Java. But then when I've had to work on a new project, it looks kind of similar. And I just Google, how do you do this in Java? Or if I do this in Java, how would I write that in C# or something like that? So you don't actually need to know the other languages in depth sometimes. You start with one, you start with it well. So I would say JavaScript or Python, really good, solid place to start. That will get you ready for data machine learning, and AI type roles, or just interests if you do the Python side. On the JavaScript side, that will get you ready for working on the web, mobile apps, that sort of thing. Really, really powerful for that. So I would say that they'll get you set up pretty well. But then if you need to learn C or Java or C sharp, or some, they're the only ones that come to mind, unfortunately, at the moment. Um, they'll set you up really, really well to go on that journey as well.
Yeah, and even basic HTML. I know it's one of the older ones, but a lot of times these companies aren't looking for a complex website. If you can do the basic HTML, you can be useful even for yourself. Even I can do a little bit of HTML, and I'm old and dumb, so it's not too difficult to at least get the basics up.
Yeah, HTML is still really powerful. You can do a lot with it. And even if you use one of the languages, so JavaScript, I say, because you can still build a HTML website using JavaScript, but you still need to know what the HTML looks like in order to do that. So HTML is never going to work against you if you start learning that too.
Obviously. Now, before I get to the students' questions, I know you mentioned Cody Black Females, and you're so humble about all the great things y'all have done, literally all over the globe. But it really is a mission of yours, and I'm with you on this. Every field, especially tech, needs diversity, and it's not that the people that are already in it are evil. It's not that the people already in it are racist, but you've got to have every type of person at the table.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's a big need for Black women. There's a big need for Black men. There's a big need for Asians. We have a lot of immigrants that will see this here in our school district that are first generation Americans that may be bilingual in their everyday conversation, and there's a need for them to get into this as well as business becomes more and more international. So, what is the main need for this field to be diverse?
I would say that it's the reason it needs to be diverse is because we're literally all using technology all the time. I don't think people always realize that when they open their phone and they use an app, every single one of those apps has been built and coded by somebody. And the people that are using it, we need the same representation within the room of people that are building it as well, because that way we build the right thing for all of us. And that's completely across the board. At the moment, I think in the UK, there's like 0.7% of Black women in the tech industry, and that's a percentage that we
Wow.
really want to see increase. It's not increased for a few years, and I really want to see that number start to go up because we kind of need it to if we're all going to be involved in tech. And it's not just the apps, it's also, if we think about the increase of the way that we're using AI, we've got these systems that we're building that are learning from us and understanding us. But if we're not programming those in the right way, with a diverse set of people when you're actually creating it, it's going to end up having the same bias in society that you then have in the systems, and it's used everywhere
Absolutely.
to negatively impact all of us. So
Yeah.
it's becoming even more important that all of those rooms are diverse now.
Yeah, and similar, and it's a similar situation in the United States. You know, it's no secret for a long time, resources were limited to certain marginalized groups. But there's not a better time to make use of all these resources that are available to everybody now. You know, just because you were raised a certain way and only saw certain careers from your grandparents, you know, that doesn't mean you have to fit into that same bubble. So there's never been a better time to really look into these tech fields and these programming languages that are, you know, available to learn. Some of them you can learn in a matter of weeks. I know the certified Scrum Master certification in the United States you can get in 2 weeks. And that's a great way to get started in these tech careers.
It really doesn't take long. So there's so many courses online, and if you put the time in a couple of weeks, you could have a website that works, that does a range of things. You could get it hosted. You can get people to start paying for things on that website. Do you know what I mean? So there's a lot that you can do in a short amount of time with the resources that we have available today. When I was learning, you know, there were books, there were some websites, and the websites weren't very good. But now there's so much more that you can learn from. I always recommend Free Code Camp, because that's got full courses that will take you through from knowing nothing right through to the end where you've seen something that you're building. So whenever people are looking at learning, Free Code Camp is always a really good place to start.
All right, now the last one thing I want to ask you before I get to the students' questions, and I think I can speak for every teacher that will see this, is all these students that we deal with, ages 12 all the way up to age 19, the first time they mess up, they're like, oh, this is too hard, I quit. How often do tech people get it right the first time?
You don't get it right the first time. You don't get it right the first time. Part of the fun is not getting it right the first time. We Anybody I ask, you know, one of the ways to be good at tech is being okay with the fact that you're not going to get it right. And you're going to learn from the fact that you didn't get it right, but you're eventually going to get there. And it's going to feel like the best feeling in the world when you do. So yeah, no, we don't get it right the first time. I still Google how to do things, and I get it wrong when I Google it as well.
Yeah, and everybody has the same answer, so it's good to hear that as a consistent answer. But I do have some questions from the students, and these are really good. This first one is Levon Johnson. He's in ninth grade, and he asked, "What has been the hardest part of your professional journey?"
The hardest part of my professional journey, probably, I would say at some point it was probably self-belief. So when you can enter some of these spaces, especially when you're starting out, people may not believe in you straight away because you've got to prove yourself. But then also you've got to believe in yourself that you should be proving yourself, if that makes sense. So for me, I think it was my self-belief. Over time, you know, after making those mistakes, after fixing things, after realizing actually I do know what I'm doing, it meant that anytime I did make a mistake going forward, I could say, yeah, but I know that I've made a mistake before and I got over it. And I know that this was hard and I know I got over it. And that helped me to get over some of that. So yeah, some of that was self-belief. And then once I got past that, I could then go into any room and tell people what I thought, and it made it a lot easier.
Yeah, and we've had other guests of this class say the same thing, is that if you're the first person to ever do something, it can be intimidating. But you have to remind yourself, I earned this place and I'm here for a reason. Like the ladies in Hidden Figures, you know, especially back in that time in the United States with all the segregation going on, it can be a real thing. And imposter syndrome is very real.
Yeah.
But it's that, you know, it's that mental toughness saying earned my place here and I deserve to be here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I love this one. This is Michael Sherrill. He's in 10th grade, one of our American football players here at Velma Jackson High School. And he asked, what's the most rewarding part of your career?
The most rewarding part of my career, I would say now it's anytime somebody that we've trained gets a job and they change their life, right?
That's
So
awesome.
we have people that come to us and they could come because they just think tech sounds cool or whatever, right? But then ultimately they train with us over a few weeks or over a few months' time. And then at the end, they're like, do you know what? I've actually just changed my life. I am now able to like live somewhere else with my kids, or I have more time to spend with my family, and
Yeah,
I'm earning more money, and I can now do this in my life.
that's
And for me,
awesome.
that's what makes it worth it. I could have the worst day in the world, and then someone tells me that something good happened in their life because of the work we do, and it just sets it all aside.
Yeah, and that's not bad for somebody that started it out just as a meetup group. That really is. I mean, the story of coding black females, and again, you're so humble about it, but the story of coding black females is just spectacular, and that's got to be a great feeling.
Thank you.
This is Rondell Ellis. He's in ninth grade, and he asked, has the importance of your career changed since you started coding black females?
Yeah, it has. So when I was working as a software engineer, I kind of realized pretty quickly that I could only work on projects that have a mission or a purpose behind them. I can't just work on something just for the sake of it. I can only work on things with a mission. So initially, that was very important. It meant that I would only really work in the public sector because I knew that we were impacting people's lives. I think now with Coding Black Females, it's like I'm so much closer to it. And you can see, like I just said, you can really see the impact that you're having on people's lives on a day-to-day basis. I speak to people that they're living in some really difficult spots, and to know that tech can get somebody out of a really difficult spot is a fantastic thing, because anybody can do it. All you need is access to a computer, and I'm not saying that's always an easy thing to come by, but if you've got access to a computer, then you can literally start being a developer if you actually want to be, and if you want to put the time in. And I think knowing that has made everything that I do more important, and it's made like me realize you said earlier that the tech community is actually very lovely, and the tech community is very lovely and very supportive once you're learning, and seeing the way that people in tech support people in tech to make that life change, that's super important to me.
Absolutely. Well, I just got one more. This is Tykevian Boyd. He's in 10th grade, very interested in getting into game design. So that's, this could be a field he gets into. But he asked, what do you think is in the future for coding and programming?
What do I think is in the future for coding and programming? So, one thing is the way that we're coding now. So, when I was doing it, was very, if I got stuck on a problem, for example, I would look in books and I would go on Stack Overflow and I would look on a lot of websites and I wouldn't quite get the answer. Now, when I get stuck, I go to ChatGPT and I tell it my problem and it gives me a solution that actually is quite viable and generally works. So, one thing is the way that we're building is that we're getting support out there now from AI. So there's things like ChatGPT, but then GitHub has Copilot, which is almost like an online friend who can support you whilst you're building. So we do a lot of pair programming when we're developing, but Copilot is essentially that, but in AI, right? So that's one thing, is the way that we're working with other people will change over time. The other thing, obviously, we're also seeing the movement to understanding data to do machine learning so that we can create artificial intelligence. And if we don't get on board with that, we're all going to be left behind. So that's the thing. It's really making sure that we're understanding how to, even if it's just from a data management and analysis perspective, it's understanding how to manage our data and analyze it so that we can then learn from it, and that we can create the right intelligence in the future as well. So that's what I would say is we're seeing the movement towards data and machine learning, but then also the way that we're getting support when we're coding is changing too. One thing that's going to become, what's becoming more and more important, is also cybersecurity. So we're needing to know how to keep ourselves safe online, whilst also building software that's secure and safe as well. So that's another thing that I would say is we're having to focus on it more because of how accessible everything is that we're building.
Yeah, and you mentioned finance. Finance is probably the number one industry worldwide that needs cybersecurity people. I know people that work in banks that don't know anything about banking, but they can run the best cybersecurity program you could ever imagine.
Mhm.
So that's another example of every field really needs good tech people.
Absolutely.
Now, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for taking some time for us. But a couple things before we go. First of all, tell us where to find Coding Black Females online, and all of your social medias on there. You're a great social media follow.
Yeah, so codingblackfemales.com is our website. That's where you can sign up to our events, mentor programs, and training courses. And then in terms of our social media, it's all Coding Black Females, except for on X, where we are Coding Black Femmes.
Awesome. Now, the last thing before we go is, you've done such a great job of diversifying this field and getting the word out for the need for diversity. So, but why should these kids, no matter who they are, no matter what color they are, what gender, what language they speak, why should they really look into getting into these tech fields, whether it be on the hardware side, the software side, the data side, or the programming side?
Because if you get into that space, there are going to be jobs available for you in the future, is one thing. There are so many roles out there. Obviously, we have dips and we have different times that come across us, but those roles are going to be there because we have to have people working in tech all the way across the industry. That's one thing. The other is, I'd say, is for me, it's extremely enjoyable. So that's the first reason I want people to get into it, is because of how much I love it and how much fun it is. So you can actually just have a lot of fun in building software and getting involved in it. So I would say it's an enjoyable thing to do, but then also you're setting yourself up for the future as well.
Awesome. Well, again, we thank you so much for taking some time for us. Charlene Hunter, the founder and CEO of Coding Black Females, all the way from the United Kingdom across the Atlantic Ocean. We thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
All right. Cheerio, my friend.
Cheerio. Bye bye.